Well, firstly, good morning to everybody. Sorry, let me just get used to the technology here. It would be a good start if I actually pressed the button and got the right slide, so we'll try again. So, good morning. My name is Pat Jefferies and I am the Commercial Director at Abloy UK. The first thing I'd like to say here is commercial means sales, but I'm actually not here today to sell you anything. So you will hear very little mention about Abloy. I'm really here representing, working with ACT, and from our perspective, our skills level is all about the door. It's all about providing the solution at the front end, which actually is the user interface, and actually making that work correctly, but also observing and understanding the legislation that lives around that in terms of fire and particularly escape door applications. So as an introduction, to give you a little bit of a background, we at Abloy UK actually invented the Abloy Academy. Great phrase, but we did this probably some 10 years ago. And really the aim of the Academy, and it came from very, very small beginnings 10 years ago, was to actually take the message to market and actually let people understand what we should and what we shouldn't be doing, particularly in terms of fire and escape. And what we have managed to do is, over the years, we've built a reputation of being very much an honest broker, a source of knowledge, and really somewhere that can actually provide you with that correct hardware solution. And I've mentioned two keywords, the two keywords of fire safety and also being able to escape. Something we'll come back to later on, but of course there is another driver. The other driver is that we actually want a secure door as well. So all of these three things are something that combine together, and this is really what the Academy at Abloy does. Now obviously I've just introduced the fact that commercial means sales, so I'm really now trying to put a little bit of emphasis back so that you actually have an understanding that, you know, as a business we've invested a lot of time and effort with the bodies in our industry to actually give us some credibility. Firstly, I am actually an engineer by trade. I'm actually an electronics engineer, albeit that I've been in the lock industry now for 30 years, mainly mechanical. But I've also served my time with the Guild of Architectural Ironmongers to actually understand the door, the bigger picture, not just the lock, because there's lots of things that are important. We also work very closely with the Institute of Architectural Ironmongers, which again would be very much like you gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen today, actually sitting in doing your CPDs. We also have to do our CPDs to keep our registration up. People like the Association of Locksmiths of Ireland and their sister element, the Master Locksmiths Association in the UK. They're all bodies that we've worked with, and indeed all of these bodies also actually have a CPD requirement. And of course at the top there we've actually got REBA, which actually is the Architects Association in the UK, and again REBA points are actually available for our CPDs. All of these are bodies that actually have an influence. They're all bodies that actually work together to try and bring this message to market. But there is another one there, the Door Hardware Federation, and the Door Hardware Federation is a body where they actually look at the standards that are applicable. We'll talk about European standards later, and just to clear that message up, European standards are BS standards, and of course they're IS standards, because we now have a common message. We have a common way of working throughout the European Union. And just to clear that message up slightly further, the Europeans aren't adding cost, the Europeans aren't adding complications. What they are doing is they're actually adding a message, and a very simple message, and they're teaching us about fire compliance, they're teaching us about escape, but they're also making it common throughout the European Union. So it's not legislation for legislation's sake, it really is good, sound information. Door Hardware Federation produce most of the how-to guides that we actually present as part of the Academy. Because I'm going to talk to you about minimum performance standards, not about Abloy product. And equally, as a business, Abloy, we've invested a great deal of time with the standards bodies. For my sins, I'm now the UK expert for electric lock-in and for escape door systems. So I actually serve on the SEN committees, I will say in Brussels, but in fairness it's not Brussels, it's normally Sweden. And that also means that I'm now retained by BSI, so I'm considered to be the UK's electric locking expert. I'm not sure that's actually a good thing, but it does mean that we're actually putting some investment back in to actually help to develop these minimum performance standards. So really just to show you what I want to talk to you about today, and I'm really only trying to give you a flavour. I can't put all of the messages into this short period of time, but I want to talk to you a little bit about the constructions product regulation. I want to explain how that affects what we as specifiers specify for fire or escape door applications. Talk about the various escape standards, and one of the things we talked about this morning was we actually said, look, you know, if there is a fire alarm activation today, we need to escape through that door or that door. And that's something that, as a nation, I'm going to take responsibility now being British, but you know, British or Irish, we talk about fire exits, and that's a word that the Europeans don't like, because fire is only one of the reasons we need to escape a building. But let's come back to that one a little bit later on. We're going to look at what standards we currently have. We're going to talk about something called HENs. Now, we've mentioned ENs. ENs are European norms. They're British standards, or they're Irish standards. But when we have a harmonised standard, it actually means we must do. We don't actually have a choice. We have to adhere to harmonised standards. So, again, lots of mysteries around them, but hopefully we can start the ball rolling and talk about them a little bit. We're going to talk about compliance specifications and the risk in solutions. And the last thing I'm going to talk about are further study opportunities, because, you know, this is a big subject. It is all about the door, and actually, if we think about it, the door is instrumental in everything we do. We need it to ensure that it's going to compartmentalise a building in the event of fire. We need to ensure we can get through it when we need to escape. But equally, we want the door to perform other functions like providing the security barrier. So it's actually quite an important element of most of what you're going to be learning or talking about today. So what I have mentioned is I've mentioned the Constructions Product Regulation, or CPR for short. And of course this is our European Parliament in Brussels, and if we take a little bit more of a look at that, we'll actually see that the Constructions Product Regulation was originally developed in 1991, but it was actually called the Constructions Product Directive. Now there's a little bit of a change in the phraseology there, because the idea of the Constructions Product Directive was that all EU member states would adopt this policy, bring it into their legislation and make it a legal requirement. And if we just pick on one of the items, you know, the door closer on that door up there, well, that door closer is a fire door. If that door closer doesn't close the door, we've actually got an ineffective fire door. That's a major risk to our life safety. So this was all about life safety. But when this was brought in, there were certain member states, and you and I are both offenders, because it was the UK, it was Ireland, Sweden, and I also understand Portugal. We actually didn't make it legally binding on our statute book. The European Union has tried to close those loopholes, and you know, we're all aware that the European Union has brought us all sorts of strange things. You know, we have a newspaper in the UK called The Sun. It's quite an interesting read, and that's not because of page 3. It is an interesting read. And they talk about the bananas being the wrong shape, tomatoes being the wrong colour, and we get all sorts of nonsense that comes from Europe. Let's put one thing straight right now. What Europe is bringing us with the Constructions Product Directive is life safety. It is a serious matter, but more importantly, they've actually brought us a right way. It's not my opinion, somebody else's opinion. And if we talk to a safety man wants to get out. The security man wants to stop you getting in. And there's always been a conflict. But now there's not a conflict, because you can actually achieve all of this through the European standards. So the loophole's been closed. It was closed on the 1st of July 2013. And the one thing I'm going to say is that is all good news, because it's all about life safety in terms of escape and also fire safety within a building. So when we look at the construction's product regulation, it really talks about two different eventualities. It talks about fire doors. Well, that door up there is a fire door. I think the door down there is a fire door. I've not looked too carefully, but it is a fire door. We can see the fire door keep shut sign on it. But actually it's also an escape door. So any door in any building that is fire rated or escape rated, the construction product regulation actually applies. And that actually means that it's actually a criminal offence to fit a non-CE marked product onto a fire or escape door. And this is really where we come back to these harmonised standards, because we've talked about standards. So for argument's sake, the door closure standard is EN 1154. That's a harmonised standard. It's an essential requirement. The door must close. But again, we talk a little bit more about that as we actually go through, because CE marking actually is also dangerous. So what are the harmonised standards? Well, it's a small h and an EN. It means it's a harmonised standard. The harmonised standard actually changes depending on the door's application. But where we have a harmonised standard, a product must be CE marked. But the product must be CE marked to the correct harmonised standard. That will become quite important as I talk a little bit later on about a certain application. And CE marking is something that applies to a variety of different products. I mean, one of the first products that CE marking applied to was actually a bag of cement. Now, I actually live very near to Westbury Cement Works in the UK, and I'm building an extension at home. And I went to buy a bag of cement at the weekend, and I actually thought I was buying a bag of CE, because the CE mark's got so big on the bag of cement, and underneath it says Portland Cement. But CE marking is all about safety. It's all about the safety of the product, and of course CE marking applies, as we said, to lots of different things. But for what we're concerned about today, it's all about a product's behaviour in the event of fire, or a product's ability to allow us to escape a building, life safety situations. I think we probably all agree that we obviously all want that fire door. In the unlikely event that there is a fire in the corridor, we actually would like that fire door to provide us with the protection for us to escape through that door. I think we also would probably all agree in the need to escape. We'd like both escape doors to work. And that's really what this is all about. Firstly, if we're to understand this, we actually need to go back a little bit to basics. We have to understand that CE marking is only possible for essential requirements. So what does this actually mean? Well, I think the first thing we need to do is we need to look at the standards that we actually have got. And one of the things I like to try to teach people is, rather than actually saying, what do I want to do to that door? Well, actually, you know, it's a real problem in here, because when we're sat in here, people keep walking in. And we're in the middle of a presentation. So we'd actually like to put some form of access control on the door. Well, that's fine. But you need to go back to basics and actually think about what the door is. So rather than actually thinking about what you want to do to the door, ask yourself a couple of key questions. And those key questions are, what is that door? Well, we know the door is an escape door. We actually know the door is a fire door. So I try to teach people to actually walk towards the door and recognise the door, but think of the door as a hole in the wall. And in actual fact, what we should be doing is going back to the original planning consent, which will clearly define whether it's an escape and a fire door. But what we have got is we've got a host of standards. Now, I'm actually not going to go through all of these today because we actually don't have time, but we have EN 179 for an emergency escape door, a very important standard. We actually have EN 1125 for a panic escape door, again, an important standard. We've got standards for door closers. We've got standards for hinges. We have standards for lock cases, standards for cylinders, standards for the furniture that fit onto there. we actually might want to hold a fire door open. Well, that's absolutely fine. We can hold it open. There's a right and a wrong way of doing it. EN 1155 describes that. We may have rebated doors and need coordinating devices. Really important test, EN 1634 Part 1. It's actually the only fire test that's now valid throughout Europe. Any product fitted onto a fire door must be tested to EN 1634 Part 1. Standards for electric locking. We actually have standards for electrically controlled emergency exit systems. Can I just throw one thing in here? When I wrote this presentation a couple of months ago, it was a PR, which means it's provisional, best practice. It's now a ratified standard, so drop the PR, it's now an EN. In the UK, we have something called the Equality Act. We used to call it DDA, but DDA is discriminatory in its title, so we now make a building accessible for all, and we call it the Equality Act. We have something called the Regulatory Reform Order, but again, you know, depending on which jurisdiction we're working in, this actually changes. So in Ireland, it's the Safety, Health and the Safety, Health and Welfare Act at Work 2005. Now that changes responsibility. And lastly, of course, we have building regulations, minimum requirements. And all of that builds me up to the picture that my hole in the wall and my door, because I now need to know what function the door has been planned within the building to perform. One of the big things we need to look at here is fire and escape. And the differential between a fire door keep shut and a fire door keep locked. Because a fire door keep shut has a bigger requirement than a fire door keep locked. And these two pictures probably give us both doors in one, because we actually have a fire door keep shut there. We may want to put access control onto that. We certainly need a door closer to close it. My fire door keep locked over there is a store cupboard. Could be a plant room. There's probably a potential heat source in that room. But the requirements for those doors are actually slightly different. And if I just say you don't need a door closer on the fire door keep locked, but you do need a door closer on the fire door keep shut. What it does lead us back to is classification, because fire doors are not necessarily emergency or panic escape route doors. One of the things we've traditionally done, and this was driven very much by our fire brigades who've done a great job. They've taught us about fire doors, fire safety. They've taught us we need to escape a building, fire escape, and that's the problem. Because we traditionally call our fire doors fire exits. There's no doubt that that's caused a great deal of confusion with specification, and it still does today. When I joined this industry 30 years ago, I could not tell the difference between a fire door and a fire escape. One of the first things that happens, and you know, when you sit on a European committee, there's 16 different member states, and there are 14 different recognised languages. Thankfully, English has now become the common language, otherwise I couldn't participate. But the first thing you'll actually say is, well, we call it a fire exit. Now, the German will jump straight up and say, you're confusing. Why fire exit? They're escape doors. And they define them as emergency or panic escape. Now, I didn't really understand this until you start listening a little bit more. In my opinion, I'm actually going to agree with them, because fire is only one of the reasons we escape a building. I mean, let's think of a typical access control door where potentially, let's put that door up there, we put our access control on it, we put a magnet, we put a request to exit button, and we put an emergency call point. Now, I actually agree, if the fire alarm goes off, our sensor, wherever it is in this room, is actually going to break the power to the door, and the door will be free. I can escape in the event of fire. What if there's a gas leak? Do I hope I've got enough oxygen to survive until I'm rescued, or do I take the risk of breaking the emergency call point in a potential spark? How do you think we'd actually stand in a court of law if we were trying to defend that, when there is now a right way of actually accessing that door? So we now have two standards. Our two standards are EM179 for emergency escape doors. And EM179 applies in areas of a public building that are non-public areas with trained staff. Now, firstly, this is exactly what's written in the standard, but it needs some punctuation in it. Applies in areas of a public building, comma. But the definition of a public building is any building that's not a residential house or a multi-occupancy dwelling. Non-public areas. Well, if we look at the first building there, that was our old offices in Watford. And our old offices in Watford, we didn't have the general public in. There was no trade counter. It was just a commercial building where Abloy was run from. If you visited us, you were a signed-in visitor. And you were always accompanied by a trained member of staff. We actually knew that in the event of an emergency situation, we would take you out of the door, around the building, and we'd actually meet at the muster station. We did regular drills every week, a real drill to ensure that we understood that. So that's a typical definition of a public building with a non-public area. And what the legislation says is that you must be able to escape through those doors at all times via a live lever handle or paddle handle. But just to qualify, that door actually doesn't have a lock on. That's absolutely fine. So free from fastenings or fixings actually overrides this, but that's the only thing that overrides it. But we also do have another risk, and the other risk is EM1125 for panic escape doors. And that actually applies in a public area. Best example, you've gone to the cinema, well, not dissimilar to where we are today. But when you sat down in the cinema, you didn't know where the emergency escape doors were, but you did, because there were two big green running men either side of the screens, and I could guarantee in the need to escape, we all knew which way to go. In that particular case, there's a little block there called assemblies. I'll come back to that in a second. But in that particular case, we actually need a panic bar, either a crash bar or a touch bar, that will allow escape at all times. This word assemblies, it just means that if we've got a 179 risk, but we've got more than, don't write this number down, more than 60 escapees, what we need to do is we need to upgrade to the higher standard. Now, firstly, Irish building regulation drops that to 50. That's, you can always do more than, and your regulation says more than 50. You can't do that, you must do that. But also you can think of a room like this. Don't know what the maximum capacity is here, but I'm going to say the maximum capacity is 100. We've got two doors. If we've got two doors, we can divide the number of escapees by the number of doors. I keep talking about harmonised standards. Well, harmonised standards, it's not everything that goes onto the door. Everything that goes onto the door must have a valid fire test, but only certain products need to be CE marked. And those products are the hinges. They need to be CE marked to EN 1935. They are an essential requirement. If the hinges don't work, the fire door doesn't close, the escape door doesn't open. They are an essential requirement. Door closer, essential requirement. By the way, gentlemen, I don't sell door closers or hinges, so I'm trying to be an honest broker. The door closer is vital on a fire door. If that fire door fails to close, our compartment seal is compromised, and we have an ineffective fire door, an unsafe building, and actually we have no security, and our access control system is completely wasted. So quite a multi-faceted requirement. It needs to be CE marked to EN 1154. If we put a lock on the door, and this is where we've got our fire door keep locked, not our fire door keep shut. Where we've got a lock on the door, the lock needs to be CE marked to EN 12209. If it's my fire door keep locked, I've got no escape requirement through that door. Those three components, that's the end of my of the construction's product regulation. They are the three essential requirements. However, if my fire door is also an escape door, or if it's an escape door in its own right, when we talk about the lock becomes part of a package of products. The package of products is actually the handle. It's the lock case and the strike plate. and they are all CE marked together as an escape device. So if I decide that I actually want some more attractive handles with that lock case, I actually can't do that because they need to be tested together and CE marked together, because it's all about life safety requirements. CE marking confirms that a product is safe for use in 6 key categories. One of them is fire, and that bit refers to EN 1634 Part 1, which is the fire test. But CE marking is also one of the misused areas of the legislation. The CE marking must be relevant to the product that you're looking at. Now, I normally pick my mobile phone up and I wander to a door, but I've already been given direction from the man who's videoing that I'm moving too much, so I'm trying to stand still. My mobile phone actually has a CE mark. The PC has a CE mark. Now, if I actually went to that door over there and said, I'm going to screw my mobile phone on this door because actually it's CE marked, so we know it's fire tested, it's suitable for use on a fire door. Apart from the fact you think I've lost the plot, which clearly I have, of course it's not been fire tested for use on the door. If we look at our electromagnet, and we picked up on that earlier on, did it give us a lever handle or paddle handle? No, it didn't. With the electromagnet as a CE mark. But the CE mark's for electromagnetic compatibility. It is not because it's got a valid fire test for use on a fire door, which is why CE marking is dangerous. So again, there's lots of things that we can talk about, but today we don't really have time. But if you also look at this technical standards document, TS010, which actually deals with electromagnetic devices, one of the phrases in there, it says it's not suitable for use on emergency or panic escape doors. And that's all about the ability to escape. This is a slide that I found on the internet, and I do use quite often in some of the courses because, you know, I've given you some information, but the information's not enough to actually understand the subject that we're talking about. And when I'm going to talk a little bit about the academy in a second, but when we run the academy courses in Willenhall or locally, the one thing we do find is that by lunchtime, you look around the room and you've got lots of very tired looking faces. And there's no doubt it's quite a complicated subject. There are lots of things that we need to know. But what we will do today now is just talk a tiny bit about compliance solutions, but eventually all of this we can join together. But we really can't get all of those messages in today. But picking up there, essential requirements are harmonised standards. If it's a fire door, keep locked. We've got 3 elements. 2 of them are shown, which are the hinges and the lock case. If we fit a door closer on there, it becomes an essential requirement, but we actually don't need one because that door would be locked and secured. If we've actually got a fire door keep shut, which is 90% of fire doors in a building, we actually have a slightly different set of essential requirements. We need the hinges CE marked, we need the door closer CE marked, we need the lock case CE marked. And of course the variation on a theme is that we now add the emergency escape requirement to it, and we either need a panic bar to a panic escape requirement or a lever handle to the emergency escape requirement. So that simplifies those door sets, still not everything in place. One of the things, of course, is that actually all of these standards, they're all mechanical. So you might be wondering how we join this up with electric locking. And the one thing we need to understand here is that just because I want to put an access control system on that door, it doesn't mean that I can compromise the fire or escape integrity of the door. These standards apply whether it's a mechanical or an electromechanical door. So how do we actually get that to work? When the construction product regulation first came in, we've been training for many, many years, and you know, we should be doing, but now we have to do. And I thought to myself, how many doors are there? I thought, well, there's a wooden door with a vision panel, there's an aluminium door, there's a glass. I thought, no, that's not the question I was asking myself. How many types of door are there in a building? And I surprised myself, because actually there are only 6. So if I put the first door up, door A, it's not a fire door, it's not an escape door. Nothing in the construction product regulation affects that door. That door is purely there for convenience. That was why it was put there. It's a good idea to fit standard compliant product, but you don't have to. But as soon as we start looking at the other doors, we've got a non-fire door, emergency escape door, probably the final exit door for this building. We actually have a requirement under the construction's product regulation to fit harmonised products, CE mark, to that door. The door we came in through this morning actually has an approved CE mark escape device fitted to it. So again, that's really a door type B. Door type C, non-fire panic escape, same door, different risk. Door type D, fire door non-escape. That was probably my fire door keep lock that I mentioned earlier on. Door type E, very common door, it's that door there. It's an emergency escape door. It's also a fire door. It's that door over there as well. And of course we then get the fire door panic escape. Again, not time to go into great detail today, but you can actually specify a building as you walk round by A, B, C, D, E, F. What that actually allows us to do is it allows us to actually work out our specification, and then by using the compliant handbook, and again this is a, this now is an Abloy document, so I take off my honest broker role now and I'm actually back to Abloy. We will actually teach you about the doors, about the products, about the interaction of those products, ensuring that they work together so that they actually provide the joined up. And we talked about integration earlier on. Well, we're not integrating through wires. Of course we're reporting through wires, but we're actually integrating through a compliant, user-friendly, familiar and legal lock-in end to what we've talked about this morning. Foundations course is free for all. 700 people in last year, 800 this year, 500 the year before. We've had lots and lots of people through there. They vary from installers, specifiers, architects, engineers. Everybody's welcome. It's free to attend. You can book your course on Abloy Academy at abloy.co.uk, and indeed if it's something that you gentlemen would like to do, or as a nucleus of people, we will actually bring the Academy to Ireland. That's not a problem. A venue like this is absolutely wonderful. So, sorry, from that perspective, I'd like to thank you for listening today. Hopefully you've got some information from there, and probably from my perspective the biggest driver would be if any of you actually want to take that further and learn a little bit more. But thank you very much.